The Dominion's pride. The Krillian war chamber hummed with the sound of 1,000 tactical displays, each one showing the movements of fleets across distant star systems. The room itself was a masterpiece of military engineering, carved from a single piece of black volcanic glass and suspended in the heart of the Dominion's greatest warship. Admiral Thexka stood at the center of it all, his four arms moving in precise patterns as he manipulated holographic battle maps that floated in the air around him. The Krillians were proud of their military perfection. For 3 centuries, they had conquered every species they encountered through what they called the doctrine of calculated supremacy. Every battle was planned down to the smallest detail. Every ship movement was predetermined. Every enemy reaction was anticipated and countered before it could happen. War, to the Krillians, was nothing more than mathematics made manifest in space. General Vextar entered the chamber with the confident stride of someone who had never known defeat. His exoskeleton gleamed with the purple markings that indicated his rank, and the neural implants along his elongated skull pulsed with data from the fleet's tactical network. Behind him walked his tactical staff, each one a specialist in a different aspect of orbital warfare. "Admiral," Vextar said, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made Krillian speech sound like music to most species, "the preliminary scans of the human settlement are complete. The results are even better than we hoped." Thexka turned from his displays, his large compound eyes reflecting the blue light of the tactical projections. "Show me," he commanded, and the air between them filled with a 3-dimensional map of the New Haven system. The human colony world hung in space like a blue and green jewel, surrounded by orbital stations and defended by what appeared to be a small fleet of ships. To Krillian eyes, the human vessels looked crude and primitive, built from what seemed to be basic metal alloys, with no energy shielding visible on their hulls. "Observe," said tactical specialist Kethri, pointing to the human ships with one of her many tentacles. "Primitive fusion drives, kinetic weapons, and what appears to be chemical-based armor plating. Their largest vessel masses only 40,000 tons. By comparison, our smallest destroyer masses 100,000 tons. Vextar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. "The humans have been in space for less than 2 centuries. They are children playing with dangerous toys. How many vessels do they have?" 17 ships in total, Kethri replied. 12 appear to be escort vessels, 3 are medium cruisers, and 2 are what they might consider battleships. Our intelligence suggests they call their largest ship the UES Defiance." Admiral Thexka studied the tactical display with the practiced eye of someone who had orchestrated the conquest of 47 different star systems. The human formation was all wrong by Krillian standards. Their ships were spread out in what looked like a defensive screen around their planet, but the distances were too great for mutual support and too small for effective maneuvering. It was the kind of formation that a species might use if they had never fought a real space battle. "What of their population?" Thexka asked. "Approximately 12 million humans on the planet's surface," reported Intelligence Officer Krikstal. "Another 300,000 spread across their orbital installations. They appear to be primarily engaged in agricultural production and light manufacturing. No significant military installations detected." The Admiral's compound eyes glittered with satisfaction. The Krillian Dominion needed new worlds to fuel their expansion, and agricultural planets were always valuable. Better still, this one would require minimal effort to subdue. The humans would surrender quickly once they realized the hopelessness of their situation, and the planet could be prepared for Krillian colonization within a standard cycle. "Begin the approach," Thexka ordered. "Signal the human vessels that we are here to claim this system for the Dominion. Offer them the standard terms of surrender." The Krillian battle fleet began to move with the mechanical precision that had made them feared across the galaxy. 120 warships arranged themselves in perfect geometric formation, their energy shields casting an aurora of deadly light against the backdrop of space. At the fleet's heart, The massive dreadnought Inevitable Victory carried enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten glass. The fleet had been perfected over centuries of warfare. Every ship knew its exact position relative to every other ship. Every weapon system was calibrated to fire at precisely the right moment to achieve maximum effect with minimum waste. The Krillians had turned war into an art form, and they were the galaxy's greatest artists. As they approached the human defensive line, long-range sensors began feeding data to the tactical computers. The human ships were moving, but not in any pattern that made sense to Krillian military doctrine. Instead of forming up in proper battle formation, they seemed to be milling about almost randomly. Some ships moved closer to the planet, others moved further away. A few appeared to be moving in directions that served no tactical purpose whatsoever. "Are they malfunctioning?" asked Subcommander Yithko, studying the chaotic human movements. "Perhaps their communications are disrupted," suggested Kethri. "Or their command structure has broken down in panic." Vextar watched the display with growing contempt. He had studied the military history of dozens of species before conquering them, and this was always the pattern. Faced with overwhelming force, primitive civilizations fell apart. Their crude command structures collapsed under pressure, their untrained crews panicked, and their ships scattered like frightened animals. The lead Krillian ship, a heavy cruiser called the Calculating Storm, opened a communication channel to the humans. The message was transmitted in basic galactic standard, a language that most spacefaring species understood. "Human vessels, you are hereby commanded to surrender immediately. You are facing the 4th battle fleet of the Krillian Dominion. Resistance is futile. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any attempt to flee or fight will result in the complete destruction of your forces and the bombardment of your planet." For several minutes, there was no response. The human ships continued their seemingly random movements, and the Krillian fleet continued its steady advance. Some of the younger Krillian officers began to wonder if the humans had even received the message. Then suddenly, a response came through the communication array. The voice was female, speaking accented galactic standard with what sounded like supreme confidence. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Defiance. I'm speaking for the New Haven Defense Force. We've received your surrender demand, and here's our response. Go to hell." The Krillian bridge fell silent. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever refused the Dominion's offer of surrender. Most civilizations begged for mercy. Some tried to negotiate. A few attempted to flee, but none had ever responded with such casual defiance. Admiral Thexka felt his combat instincts sharpen. Perhaps these humans would provide more entertainment than he had initially expected. "Open a channel," he commanded. "Human captain," Thexka said, his harmonic voice carrying across space. "I am Admiral Thexka of the Krillian Dominion. You face 120 warships with a combined mass of 15 million tons. Your entire fleet masses less than 500,000 tons. Surely you understand mathematics." There was a pause. Then Captain Vasquez's voice came back, and there was something in her tone that the Krillians couldn't quite identify. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't desperation. If anything, it sounded almost amused. "Admiral, let me explain something about humans that you might not understand. We're really terrible at accepting impossible odds. In fact, the worse the odds get, the more stubborn we become. It's a character flaw we're pretty proud of." Vextar's mandibles clicked with irritation. "Captain, you are either brave or foolish. Unfortunately for you, both tend to have the same outcome in space combat." "Maybe," Vasquez replied. "But here's the thing about humans that your intelligence files probably didn't mention. We don't fight the way we're supposed to. We don't follow the rules. And we absolutely hate being told what to do by bullies with big ships." The human vessel Defiance began to move, and its movement was unlike anything the Krillians had ever seen in space combat. Instead of forming up with its fleet in a defensive formation, the ship accelerated directly toward the Krillian battle line. Not toward one flank or the other, where it might have some tactical advantage, but straight at the center where the firepower was heaviest. "Fascinating," murmured tactical specialist Kethry. "The humans appear to be attempting a suicide run. Should we accommodate them?" But Admiral Fekska was studying his displays with growing interest. The human ship's movement wasn't random or desperate. There was something purposeful about it, something that didn't match any tactical doctrine in the Krillian databases. The ship was moving too fast for its apparent engine capacity, and its trajectory kept changing in subtle ways that suggested the pilot was compensating for factors the Krillian computers couldn't detect. "All ships, maintain formation," Fekska ordered. "Let them come. We'll destroy them and then proceed with the planetary bombardment." But even as he gave the order, something nagged at the Admiral's tactical instincts. In his long career, he had learned to trust those instincts, and right now they were telling him that something was not quite right about this situation. The human ship Defiance continued its approach, and behind it, the rest of the human fleet began to move as well. But they weren't following their flagship in a desperate charge. Instead, they were spreading out in what looked like a completely random pattern, with some ships moving toward the planet, others moving away from it, and a few heading off at angles that made no tactical sense whatsoever. "They're scattering," reported Vextar with satisfaction. "The human fleet is breaking apart. Shall we pursue the fleeing vessels?" Admiral Fekska studied the tactical display more carefully. Something about the human movements bothered him, but he couldn't identify what it was. The ships did appear to be scattering, but there was something almost deliberate about their chaos. It was as if they were following a plan that made no sense to anyone but themselves. "Negative," Fekska said finally. "We'll deal with them one at a time. First, we destroy their flagship. That should break whatever morale they have left." The distance between the fleets continued to close, and the Krillian targeting computers began to lock onto the approaching human vessel. The Defiance was now well within range of the Dominion's most powerful weapons, flying straight into a killing field that no ship its size should be able to survive. "Fire when ready," Admiral Fekska commanded. But Captain Elena Vasquez had one more message to transmit before the shooting started. "Admiral Fekska," her voice came across the communication channel. "You've conquered a lot of species with your mathematical precision and overwhelming force. But here's something your calculations can't account for. Humans don't know when to quit. We're about to show you what happens when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object. Spoiler alert, it's going to be messy." The first shots of the battle lit up space like artificial stars, and the war between mathematics and madness was about to begin. Human ingenuity unleashed. The first volley of Krillian plasma fire illuminated the darkness of space with deadly beauty. 47 energy beams, each capable of vaporizing a small asteroid, converged on the position where the UES Defiance should have been. The mathematical precision was perfect, the timing flawless, the coordination absolute. By every calculation in the Krillian tactical computers, the human ship should have been reduced to expanding gas and molten metal. Instead, the beams struck empty space. Admiral Fekska stared at his tactical display in confusion. The human ship had been exactly where his computers predicted it would be, following a straight-line trajectory that any first-year naval cadet could calculate. But in the microseconds between target lock and weapon firing, the Defiance had somehow moved to a position that shouldn't have been physically possible. "Sensor malfunction?" asked General Vextar, his voice carrying an edge of uncertainty that hadn't been there moments before. "Negative," replied Tactical Specialist Kethry, her tentacles working frantically across her instrument panels. "All sensors are functioning normally. The human vessel simply wasn't where it was supposed to be." On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Elena Vasquez gripped her command chair as the ship completed a maneuver that violated several laws of physics as the Krillians understood them. The artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, and sparks flew from overloaded systems, but the ship held together through what human engineers had quietly dubbed an impossible turn. "Nice flying, Martinez," Vasquez called to her pilot, a young woman whose hands danced across controls that looked primitive compared to Krillian technology. "Thank you, Captain," Lieutenant Sofia Martinez replied, sweat beading on her forehead as she prepared for the next impossible maneuver. Though I should mention that what we just did should have torn the ship apart. The inertial compensators are reading errors in 17 different languages. Chief Engineer Commander Jake Thompson's voice crackled over the intercom from deep in the ship's engine room. "Captain, I don't know how much more of this the old girl can take. We're running the fusion reactors at 130% of rated capacity. The gravitational field generators are operating in configurations that don't exist in the manual, and I'm pretty sure we just invented 3 new types of physics violations." Vasquez allowed herself a tight smile. "Just keep us flying, Jake. We only need to hold together for a few more minutes." The truth was, the Defiance was performing exactly as designed, though no Krillian would have believed it possible. Humans had entered space with different assumptions about how ships should work, where other species built vessels that were marvels of efficiency and precision. Humans built ships that were designed to be pushed beyond their limits by crews who didn't know the meaning of the word impossible. The human ship's apparent randomness was actually the result of careful planning. Every impossible maneuver had been practiced thousands of times in simulation. Every system overload was within acceptable parameters. Every physics violation was actually an exploitation of principles that more advanced species had dismissed as impractical. "Second volley incoming," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen from the tactical station. "Same targeting pattern as before." "Then let's not be there when it arrives," Vasquez replied. "Martinez, execute pattern Gamma 7. The Defiance suddenly accelerated in 3 directions simultaneously, a maneuver that should have been physically impossible, but was actually the result of human engineers learning to use gravitational field manipulation in ways that textbooks said couldn't work. The ship twisted through space like a fish swimming through water, following a path that the Krillian targeting computers couldn't predict because it wasn't following any logical rules. The second Krillian volley missed by an even wider margin than the first. Admiral Thekska felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty. The human ship was moving in patterns that made no sense according to any military doctrine he knew. Worse, it was accelerating toward his fleet in a way that suggested the humans actually intended to engage in close combat. "Analysis," he demanded. Kethry's reports came rapid fire. "The human vessel appears to be using some form of gravitational manipulation to achieve impossible acceleration curves. Their ship mass keeps fluctuating in ways that suggest they're somehow altering their relationship with local spacetime. And their trajectory." She paused, double-checking her readings. "Their trajectory suggests they intend to ram the inevitable victory." "Impossible," Vextar declared. "No captain would attempt a ramming attack against a dreadnought. It would be suicide." But Thekska was beginning to suspect that humans might have a different relationship with suicide than other species. "Increase fire rate," he ordered. "All ships focus on the human flagship. Destroy it before it can reach us." The Krillian fleet opened up with everything they had. Plasma beams, quantum torpedoes, and gravitational disruptors filled space with enough energy to sterilize a moon. The barrage was so intense that it created its own light, visible from the human colony world 15 million kilometers away. And somehow, impossibly, the Defiance flew through it all. The human ship twisted and turned through the storm of fire like it was dancing. Where Krillian vessels would have used shields to absorb damage, the Defiance simply refused to be where the weapons were aimed. It spun along its longitudinal axis while simultaneously rotating around a changing center of gravity, creating a flight pattern that looked more like abstract art than military tactics. "How are they doing that?" Vextar demanded, watching his fleet's concentrated firepower fail to hit a single target. But Admiral Thekska was beginning to understand. "They're not trying to survive our attack," he said slowly. "They're trying to confuse our targeting systems. Every impossible maneuver forces our computers to recalculate. Every physics violation requires our tactical algorithms to account for new variables. They're not flying randomly. They're flying specifically to break our mathematical models. It was brilliant, and it was completely insane. The humans were sacrificing efficiency, safety, and common sense to achieve one goal: making themselves unpredictable. Where Krillian doctrine emphasized perfect coordination and calculated results, human doctrine apparently emphasized chaos and improvisation. The Defiance broke through the Krillian firing line and suddenly opened fire with its own weapons. But instead of the energy weapons that every civilized species used for space combat, the human ship fired solid projectiles. Chunks of metal accelerated to incredible velocities by electromagnetic fields. The projectiles struck the Krillian heavy cruiser methodical destruction with devastating results. Where energy weapons could be deflected by shields, kinetic rounds simply punched through them like they weren't there. The beautiful crystalline hull of the Krillian ship cracked and shattered as primitive human bullets moving at relativistic speeds tore it apart from the inside. They're using kinetic weapons, Kethri reported in shock. Solid projectiles. How barbaric. But barbaric or not, the weapons were effective. The methodical destruction broke apart in a shower of crystal fragments and escaping atmosphere, and the Defiance was already moving toward its next target. That's when the rest of the human fleet made their move. The ships that had appeared to scatter randomly suddenly revealed their true purpose. They hadn't been fleeing. They had been positioning themselves. Now they struck the Krillian formation from 17 different angles simultaneously, each ship attacking in a completely different way. The escort vessel Tenacious attacked by accelerating to ramming speed and then launching its entire complement of kinetic rounds at point-blank range before veering away. The cruiser Stubborn opened fire with weapons that seemed to bend space around them, creating gravitational anomalies that crushed Krillian ships like tin cans. The destroyer Reckless did something impossible and teleported behind a Krillian battle line, appearing in a flash of twisted spacetime to attack from the rear. Each human ship fought differently. Each captain used different tactics. Each crew improvised solutions to problems that hadn't existed moments before. Where the Krillian fleet was a symphony of coordination, the human fleet was jazz. Chaotic, unpredictable, but somehow creating harmony from complete disorder. Admiral Thexka watched his perfect battle plan fall apart in real time. His ships were trying to adapt to 17 different fighting styles simultaneously. Every time his tactical computers developed a counter for one human vessel, that ship would change tactics and do something completely different. "Sir," reported Subcommander Yithko, "we're losing ships faster than our algorithms can adapt. The humans don't follow any consistent pattern. Our predictive models can't account for their behavior." Captain Vasquez's voice came over the communication channel again, and now it was clear she was enjoying herself. "Admiral, you're learning something important about humans today. We don't have a single way of fighting because we don't have a single way of thinking. Every human captain in this fleet trained at different academies, learned from different teachers, and developed their own personal style of combat. You can't predict what we're going to do because half the time we don't know ourselves until we do it." The Defiance completed another impossible maneuver and fired a spread of kinetic rounds that somehow curved in flight, striking 3 Krillian ships simultaneously from angles that geometry said were impossible. Each impact sent shockwaves through the enemy formation as more of their perfect crystalline ships shattered like glass sculptures hit by hammers. "This is chaos," Vextar protested. "This isn't warfare. It's madness." "Exactly," Vasquez replied, somehow having heard his comment. "Welcome to human military doctrine. We call it organized chaos, and we've been perfecting it for centuries. The trick is to be just crazy enough that your enemy can't predict you, but not so crazy that you defeat yourself." The battle had become a running fight through the outer system, with human ships appearing and disappearing in flashes of distorted spacetime, while Krillian vessels tried desperately to bring their superior firepower to bear on targets that refused to hold still long enough to be hit. But the humans were taking damage too. The escort vessel Determined had lost half its hull to a lucky Krillian shot, but continued fighting anyway, its crew somehow keeping the ship operational despite having no right side. The cruiser Persistent had lost all its main weapons and was fighting with backup systems and improvised weapons that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Chen reported, "we're down to 40% combat effectiveness across the fleet. How much longer can we keep this up?" Vasquez studied her tactical display, where 17 human ships continued their chaotic dance around 87 remaining Krillian vessels. The odds were still impossible, but they were getting better. "Long enough," she replied. "Jake, how are those experimental modifications coming along?" Chief Engineer Thompson's voice came back excited. "Almost ready, Captain. Fair warning. This is going to either save us all or create a very pretty explosion visible from 3 star systems." "Those are the best kind of modifications," Vasquez replied. "Do it." Deep in the Defiance's engine room, Commander Thompson activated systems that existed in no technical manual and violated several fundamental principles of engineering safety. The ship's fusion reactors, already running beyond their design limits, were suddenly connected in series with the gravitational field generators and the main weapons array. The result was something that no sane engineer would ever attempt. The Defiance became a weapon. The ship's entire hull began to glow with barely contained energy as every system aboard was channeled into a single purpose. The vessel stopped maneuvering and instead began accelerating directly toward the Krillian flagship, building up speed and energy for one final, impossible attack. Admiral Thexko watched the approaching human ship with a mixture of respect and horror. "They're going to ram us," he said quietly. "That ship is going to hit us at significant fraction of light speed." "Evasive maneuvers," Vextar ordered. But the inevitable victory was a dreadnought, built for firepower and durability rather than maneuverability. The massive ship began to turn, but it was too little too late. The Defiance struck the Krillian flagship not with its hull, but with a concentrated burst of energy that turned matter into pure light. The collision released enough energy to briefly outshine the system's star, and when the light faded, both ships were gone. But the battle wasn't over. Inspired by their captain's sacrifice, the remaining human ships pressed their attack with even greater fury. They had learned something important about their enemies. For all their mathematical precision, the Krillians couldn't adapt to chaos. Their perfect coordination became a weakness when faced with opponents who refused to be predictable. One by one, the Krillian ships fell. Some were destroyed by kinetic rounds that punched through their shields. Others were crushed by gravitational anomalies that human science shouldn't have been able to create. A few simply disappeared in flashes of twisted spacetime, victims of experimental weapons that worked despite violating known physics. When it was over, only 12 Krillian vessels remained out of the original 120. They limped away from the New Haven system, their perfect formation in ruins, their mathematical certainty shattered by an encounter with human unpredictability. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by automated beacon transmissions and refugee ships. The Krillian Dominion, masters of calculated warfare, had been defeated by a primitive human colony fleet, using tactics that made no sense and weapons that shouldn't have worked. In the weeks that followed, species across the galaxy began to reconsider their assumptions about warfare. Perhaps there was something to be said for chaos over order, improvisation over planning, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat over mathematical certainty. The humans, meanwhile, began receiving communication requests from dozens of species who wanted to learn more about this thing called organized chaos. Some wanted to form alliances. Others wanted training in human military doctrine. A few wanted to hire human mercenaries to defend their own worlds. Captain Elena Vasquez would never know how her sacrifice changed the galaxy. But in the wreckage of the Krillian fleet, drifting through the cold space near New Haven, her final message continued to broadcast on all frequencies. "This is what happens when you threaten human families. We don't know when to quit. We don't follow the rules. And we absolutely refuse to let bullies win. Remember that, and maybe next time you'll think twice before picking a fight with Earth. The age of human expansion had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.